You think you know the story of Goldilocks. You know the tale, a curious little girl with golden hair wandering through the woods. She stumbles upon a cottage, empty and inviting. Inside, she finds 3 bowls of porridge, 3 chairs, and 3 beds. She tries them all, seeking the one that is just right. And then the owners return, a family of bears. They find their home in disarray, their property used, and the little intruder asleep in the smallest bed. She wakes, she screams, she runs, and she learns a valuable lesson about respecting the property of others. It is a simple story, a nursery classic. But that story is a lie. It is a pale, sanitized ghost of the original, a comfortable fiction painted over a grim and desperate reality. The tale you were told as a child is a deliberate and calculated alteration of a much older, darker, and more truthful narrative. It is not a fairy tale about a naughty little girl. It is a coded message, a piece of social propaganda from a brutal period of history, preserving the memory of a class war fought not on battlefields, but in the hungry lanes and cold cottages of 19th century England. Once you understand that the bears were never bears, that the cottage represents the last bastion of stability in a world of chaos, and that Goldilocks was not a name given in affection, but a cruel slur for a desperate old woman, the entire story transforms. It ceases to be a children's lesson. It becomes a crime scene, a warning. The truth they never wanted you to know. The first and most jarring piece of evidence is the original text itself. Before there was Goldilocks, before there was even a little girl, there was an intruder. But she was not young, innocent, or golden-haired. In the first ever printed version of this story, published in 1837 by the poet Robert Southey, the antagonist is described in no uncertain terms. She is, and I quote, a little old woman. Let that sink in, not a child, an old woman. Southey does not paint a sympathetic picture of her. He describes her as impudent, foul-mouthed, and thoroughly disreputable. She is not a lost innocent. She is a vagrant, a trespasser, a problem. When she is discovered by the cottage owners, she doesn't run away in girlish fear. She curses, she is violent, and she leaps from a window in a desperate, frantic escape. This is not the Goldilocks you know. This is someone else entirely, a figure born of a different, harder world. To understand her, you have to imagine the world that created her. Picture England in the 1830s. This is not a land of enchanted forests and quaint cottages. This is the dawn of the Victorian era, a time of immense convulsive change. The air in the cities is thick with coal smoke from the new factories, and the countryside is a place of profound suffering. For centuries, the rural poor had survived on common land, able to graze a cow or grow a few vegetables. But the Enclosure Acts had privatised these lands, fencing them off for large-scale sheep farming. Millions of people were displaced, cut off from their ancestral means of survival. They became a landless, rootless population. They poured into the burgeoning, squalid cities in search of factory work, or they became wanderers, drifting along the roads of England. They became vagrants. And in the eyes of the settled, property-owning class, the vagrant was the ultimate terror. You have to understand the context here. The fear of the vagrant in the 19th century was not just a mild unease. It was a deep, existential dread. These wandering people were seen as a source of moral and physical contamination. They were believed to carry diseases like cholera and typhus. They were accused of every crime, from petty theft to arson and murder. They were the visible, walking embodiment of social collapse. They were a constant, unsettling reminder to the comfortable that everything could be lost. This terror was codified into law. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 was a landmark piece of legislation, and it was utterly brutal. It established the infamous workhouse system. The explicit philosophy of the workhouse was a principle called less eligibility. This meant that conditions inside the workhouse had to be intentionally worse than the conditions of the lowest paid independent labourer outside. Think about what that means. They deliberately engineered a system of suffering. Families were separated, husbands from wives, parents from children. The food was meagre. The work was back-breaking and pointless, like picking oakum or breaking rocks. The workhouse was not a safety net. It was a deterrent. It was a place of such profound misery that it was meant to scare the poor into finding any other means of survival, no matter how desperate. It was, in the public imagination, a prison for the crime of being poor. So, the choice for a person who had lost their land and their livelihood was stark. You could submit to the slow starvation and humiliation of the workhouse, or you could take to the road. You could become one of the wandering people, a sturdy beggar, a vagrant. You could become Southie's little old woman. Let's isolate this character again, the little old woman. She is not just a random antagonist, she is a perfect archetype of the 19th century, undeserving poor. Her foul language, her brazen entitlement to the property of others, these were the very characteristics the Victorian middle class projected onto the vagrant population. They were not seen as victims of economic upheaval. They were seen as morally deficient, as lazy and criminal by nature. Imagine a woman. Let's call her Mary. Mary had a husband and a small plot of land, but he died in a factory accident, and she was evicted. She has no parish to claim her, no family left to take her in. The workhouse looms, a place she has heard spoken of only in whispers of terror. So she walks, she begs. She sleeps in ditches and barns. Her clothes are rags. Her hair, once brown, is now matted and bleached by the sun and rain to a brittle, sickly yellow. The children of the villages she passes through don't see a grandmother. They see a witch, a boggy man. They shout names at her, and perhaps one of those names, a cruel, mocking jeer for her discoloured hair, is Goldilocks. It's not a term of endearment, it's an insult. It marks her as an outcast. One day, starving and exhausted, she sees a small, well-kept cottage. Smoke rises from the chimney. It represents everything she has lost: warmth, food, safety. And in her desperation, she does not knock. She does not ask. She breaks in. This is the true protagonist of the original story. Not a child, but a desperate survivor pushed to the absolute edge. Now, let's look at the other characters. The three bears. Why bears? In Southey's telling, they are not just animals. He describes them explicitly. They are three bears who live together in a house of their own, in a wood. He calls them good bears, a little rough or so, as the manner of bears is, but for all that, very good-natured and harmless. This description is crucial. They are homeowners. They are respectable. They are the personification of the ideal, settled, middle-class family. They have order. Their possessions are their own. They have a place in the world. They represent everything the old woman is not. They are the establishment. The use of bears is a fascinating piece of coding. It could be a simple folkloric device, but it also serves to create a clear, almost primal distinction between the inhabitants and the intruder. It frames the conflict as one between civilization, the house, the porridge, the ordered family life, and the wild, untamed force that seeks to disrupt it, the old woman who is more animalistic in her desperation than the actual animals. There's another possibility. In some English dialects, bear could be used to describe a person of a certain temperament, gruff, withdrawn, but solid and dependable. It's also possible it was a play on a common surname, like Bear or Barrows, a way of creating a fictional family that felt real to the contemporary audience without naming a specific neighbour. Think of the family inside that cottage, not as bears, but as a family named Bear. The father is a smallholder, a carpenter, or a master craftsman. He has worked his entire life to secure this small piece of the world for his family. He has seen his neighbours lose their land, forced into the workhouses or onto the roads. He sees the wandering poor not with pity, but with a cold knot of fear in his stomach. They are a mirror, showing him the abyss he has so narrowly avoided. His home is not just a place to live. It is a fortress. It is a statement of his success, his respectability, his moral worth in a society that equated poverty with sin. Every chair, every bowl, every bed is a testament to his hard work and his place in the social order. The locked door is not just for security. It is a barrier between his ordered world and the chaos of the world outside, the world of the old woman. Now we come to the central scene of the story, the testing of the porridge, the chairs, and the beds. In the sanitized children's version, this is an act of childish pickiness. Goldilocks is simply looking for what suits her best. But through the lens of our old woman, this scene becomes a grim tableau of desperation and social violation. First, the porridge. It represents the most basic human need, sustenance. The old woman is starving. For her, the 3 bowls are not a matter of preference. The too hot represents a future meal, something not yet attainable. The too cold represents a past opportunity, something already lost. The just right is the fleeting, miraculous present moment, a chance to eat, to survive for one more day. She doesn't taste it, she devours it. It is a desperate act of survival. Next, the chairs. The chairs represent place, status, and rest. In the 19th century home, the father's chair was a throne of domestic authority. The mother's chair was the seat of domestic management. The child's chair was the symbol of the future, of the continuation of the family line. The old woman tests them all. She is an outcast seeking a place to belong, a moment of rest in a life of endless walking. And what does she do? She breaks the little chair. This is a profoundly symbolic act. She, the sterile crone, the figure of social decay with no future, destroys the seat of the child. It is an unconscious act of rebellion against the family structure that has no place for her. It is the chaos of the outside world literally breaking the furniture of the inside world. Finally, and most intimately, the beds. The bed is the heart of the home. It is the place of rest, of safety, of procreation, of birth and of death. It is the most private space in the domestic sphere, and the old woman, the vagrant, violates all 3. She finds the largest bed too hard. The place of the patriarch offers no comfort to her. She finds the middle bed too soft. The place of the mother offers no solace. She finally settles in the smallest bed, the child's bed. Here, the symbolism is chilling. The desperate, aging outcast, a figure representing the end of a line, curls up in the place of the future, the place of innocence. When she is found there, it is the ultimate transgression. It is the unclean, the desperate, the diseased, the criminal element of society, discovered contaminating the very core of the respectable family's future. It is the middle-class nightmare made manifest. So, what is the story truly about? We have an intruder who represents the dispossessed and feared vagrant class. We have a family who represents the settled, property-owning and fearful middle class. We have a home invasion where the fundamental elements of domestic life, food, status and security are violated and consumed. This is not a fairy tale. This is an allegory for the deep social anxieties of 19th century England. It is a story about class conflict, about the terror that the haves felt toward the have-nots. It is a cautionary tale, but the caution is not for the intruder, it is for the homeowner. It says, lock your doors, fear the stranger, protect what is yours, because the desperate world outside wants to break in, consume your resources, and destroy your family. It is a piece of propaganda that justifies the harsh poor laws and the workhouse system. It teaches the children of the middle class to see the poor not as people to be pitied, but as a threat to be feared and excluded. So how did this grim social allegory become a beloved children's story? The answer lies in the process of sanitization, a process driven by a changing view of childhood and the rise of a commercial market for children's literature. The first major change came in 1849. Just 12 years after Southey's version was published, an editor named Joseph Cundall was putting together a collection of stories called Treasury of Pleasure Books for Young Children. He included the story of the three bears, but he had a problem. In his own words, he felt that the story was better known than it deserved because the protagonist was a little old woman who had no business being in the story at all. He found her unpleasant, a bad role model, so he changed her. Cundall made a deliberate, conscious decision to replace the vagrant crone with a little girl. In his version, she is named Silver Hair. He rewrote the story to make her actions seem less like a desperate home invasion and more like the thoughtless mischief of a child who has lost her way. This single editorial decision fundamentally altered the meaning of the entire narrative. The motive was both moral and commercial. The Victorian era saw the invention of the modern concept of childhood innocence. Children were no longer seen as miniature adults, but as pure, angelic beings who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of the world. A story about a foul-mouthed, desperate old woman breaking into a house and being threatened with prison was simply not suitable for this new audience. A tale about a pretty, slightly naughty little girl who gets a scare and runs home to her mother. That was perfect. It was marketable. The transformation continued. Silver hair soon became golden hair, and eventually, by the early 20th century, she was universally known as Goldilocks. Each step took the character further away from her grim origins. The bears, too, became softer. In early illustrations, they are often depicted as realistic, intimidating creatures. Over time, they morphed into the cute, cuddly, anthropomorphic family we know today. They became less like property owners, defending their home, and more like gentle parents dealing with a wayward child. Let's compare the before and after, specifically the ending. In the modern version, Goldilocks wakes up, is frightened by the bears, and runs away. The story often ends with a simple moral. She never went into the woods by herself again, or she learned to respect other people's property. It's a neat, tidy lesson in manners. Southey's ending is far more brutal and ambiguous. When the old woman is discovered, she jumps out of the window. Southey then speculates on her fate, whether she broke her neck in the fall, or ran into the wood and was lost there, or found her way out of the wood and was taken up by the constable and sent to the House of Correction for a vagrant as she was. I cannot tell, but the three bears never saw anything more of her. The House of Correction, that is the workhouse. The threat is not just a scare, it is institutional punishment. It is the full weight of the state coming down on this woman for the crime of her poverty and desperation. The sanitization didn't just change the character, it ripped out the story's social and political teeth. It erased the historical context and replaced a grim warning about societal collapse with a gentle lesson about misbehavior. It took a story about class war and turned it into a story about table manners. Goldilocks and the Three Bears, as we know it, is not a timeless classic that has been passed down through the ages. It is a Victorian invention, a deliberate rewriting designed to obscure a terrifying social reality. The story we tell our children is a comfortable ghost, haunting the nursery with no memory of the corpse it was built upon. It is not a bedtime story. It is a crime scene preserved in narrative form. It is a monument to the forgotten poor, to the desperate masses displaced by the relentless march of industrial progress. The old woman who broke into the cottage was not a villain. She was a refugee in her own country, a casualty of a system designed to crush her. The enduring power of this story, even in its sanitized form, comes from the primal fear that lies buried at its core. It is the fear of the home invasion, the fear that the orderly world we have built for ourselves is fragile, the fear that one day the desperate world outside will find a way in. We have changed the intruder from a starving crone to a curious child, but the locks on our doors remain. We have made the homeowners into cuddly bears, but we still fear what happens when we leave our property unattended. The story survives because it whispers a deep, unsettling truth about the tension between the secure and the dispossessed, a tension that has never gone away. We have just learned to dress it up in prettier clothes and give it a cuter name. The story of Goldilocks was never about a curious little girl with beautiful hair. It was a warning from the comfortable to their children. This is the monster that poverty creates, and this is what happens when you let the starving world in.